I think for us, in the beginning, we thought the robot could do anything. And it's really easy to just use a robot for any industry. But that turned out to be very wrong. Because depending on who you sell to, it's a very different value proposition. So we then pivoted to security. And since then, the whole sales process goes way smoother because we know their processes, we know everything. So that was for us a big, like going from we can do anything to we can do just this.
Actually, in the startup so far we have not. I did a PhD, and in my PhD, my first project did not work. So I had to pivot completely and start something new. So I do know how to do this, and we'll see going forward that we follow along.
When we started this company back in 2021, we set it up to be more of a renewable power supply company out of existing industrial operations. But one thing led to the other, talking to customers, figuring out what competition is doing, and ultimately we settled on what we are doing now. How do we take waste which is being generated somewhere and then use that waste as a source of value to whoever is going to be processing it? And that's what we are trying to build right now, is how do we take a waste, build it into something of value as a source of materials?
We actually started with the idea of developing and producing packaging. Now we focus more on the base material, on the biomaterial, and we then provide to producers of packaging, for example.
We had actually a question on the technology we are developing, should we go that way or the other way, but actually we understood that we can have a differentiation comparing with other competitors in the same field, and we decided to go one specific way to actually keep an advantage and not go in the same field and compete with that startup.
When we started Perovskia, we were focusing on the big players, like the Apples and the Samsungs, because we want to work with the big giants. But then we learned they are very slow in how they move and how they work, which is normal because big organizations takes time because they have a lot to lose, not like startups. So we pivoted in a way that I used 80-20 principle, that 20% of our focus is on big organizations and 80% is on SMEs and startups. And that paid out a lot of dividend. And we have now 24 paying customers, out of which we have 6 to 8 big clients and rest SMEs, and that moves to production faster. And that's a game changer for us.
I think the first main pivot is going to different markets earlier than expected. The Swiss market is important but small, so we started focusing on the UK and now in the US. Another important pivot is not just focusing on real estate asset managers, but also the consultants who serve them. So we have actually 2 main client targets.
Telos Robotics, in the beginning, we collaborated mainly with search and rescue organizations for people search and object search. And now we see that there's more and more interest also in the industrial applications. And so we shifted basically our focus from the search and rescue field towards industrial applications, industrial inspection, and so on. So that's the main pivot we did.
Our first indication was actually neonatal sepsis. However, from the market feedback and also the ethical hurdle, we were kind of forced to shift our gears to other indications, which is immuno-oncology. But however, it was not all loss. All the data experience we generated there was able to help us to better identify the right indications and better design our experiment and science.
When I started as an entrepreneur, I definitely was very motivated by Silicon Valley, and there you hear pivots quite a bit. For us, when we really started, our focus was to use the matrix targeting technology for diagnostic purposes. But we very early on realized, talking to clinicians, that might be not the best use case of the opportunity we have. And we very quickly pivoted to a therapeutic approach or a precision medicine approach to treat fibrotic diseases, and specifically pulmonary fibrosis.